and those of us who don't want a Muslim ban see it as such.
Wrong.
It really is a Muslim ban shrouded by this national security rationale is what he's done, and that's illegal.
Wrong.
It is a Muslim ban.
Wrong.
Hello and thank you for tuning in. I am the Rogue Savage, and today I would like to discuss with you a little bit about this Muslim ban. Well, let's be honest, it's a Muslim ban that isn't. In fact, it's more of a moratorium, in that it is temporary. Now let me explain. First of all, why is it not a Muslim ban? Well, according to the PewResearchCenter, this moratorium, as it is more aptly put, only affects about 12% of the world's Muslim population. And of the 7 listed countries in the executive order, the only country that is among the largest of the Muslim populations is Iran. And of the 1.6 billion with a B Muslims in the world, 62% live in the Asia-Pacific region. So really, if this is a ban, I mean, let's face it, it's not really doing a good job of acting like a ban. If it was, it should include countries such as Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, and so on, and so on, and so on. But it doesn't. Okay, so if this isn't a ban on Muslims, what does it do exactly? I think that's a fair question, right? What it does do is it halts refugees who are traveling to the United States for 120 days. And it bars citizens from these countries travel into the United States for 90 days. Now, it is important to note that as far as the refugees are concerned, it halts travel from Syrian refugees indefinitely until, well, further notice, basically. But even so, that's still meant to be temporary. So if you actually read the executive order, which I have, and I'll include a link in the description, the purpose behind it, and as it states, is to essentially protect the United States citizens from people who would insert themselves into these groups of people coming into the United States who would essentially harbor nefarious intent, such as terrorism as an example. And it also gives the United States time to properly assess the vetting procedures associated with these different countries. Now that's important to note, because yes, we do have a very rigorous and complicated vetting system that many people might deem to be thorough. But the problem with the vetting system that we have is that the intelligence that is used to conduct the background checks for these individuals primarily comes from their country of origin. So when you look at some of these countries that are included in this executive order, countries like Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, these are essentially failed states or failing states. And because of that, there really is no government power which we can rely on to give us proper vetting information. And if you look at Iran specifically, well, I mean, let's face it, Iran has been actively supporting terror organizations whose goal is to target not just Americans, but American allies, such as Israel, for example. So putting it under that context, it kind of makes sense then why these countries were chosen in the first place. In fact, it wasn't even Donald Trump that chose these countries. It was Obama back in December of 2015, as he signed into law restricting travel from these countries. And it would seem for good reason. Because as anybody who has been keeping track of the migrant crisis would tell you, Europe in particular has been negatively impacted in many ways from this migrant crisis. For example, Sweden, a country which was once considered to be one of the safest places in the world, is oftentimes referred to as the rape capital of Europe. Not to mention that ISIS, on numerous occasions, not only declared that they would insert their fighters in with these migrant refugees in order to attack Western countries, but they've oftentimes succeeded in doing so. In fact, NATO commanders have actually stated that ISIS is spreading like a cancer within the refugee community. Case in point, the attacks in Paris, which killed about 130 people. This atrocity carried out by merely 4 individuals who were refugees. Now, this executive order by no means is unprecedented either. In fact, in 1980, Jimmy Carter actually put a halt on individuals carrying visas from Iran. And I mean, really, if we're going to talk international, why don't we have a public outcry regarding the 16 countries that have banned Israelis from entering their country? Now, I don't want to put too much praise on this particular document. It was very poorly written, and executed for that matter. There was a lot of language that was very vague, especially when it concerned actions taken on people who were coming into the country already holding active visas. Not to mention it left out a number of countries that could have legitimately been placed on this document, like, for example, Afghanistan. We're still having problems with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and Pakistan for, the similar reasons. Now, granted, they're not necessarily failing states. Both have more or less functioning governments, but they're not really that great. I mean, let's be honest. You see, that actually leads me to my next point. I've heard critics these past few days, people who oppose the executive order, state that there are certain countries that maybe should have been placed on the executive order, such as Saudi Arabia. And their justification was the fact that 9/11 was actually cited in the executive order. The problem with that is, Saudi Arabia is not by any means a failed state. In fact, they're considered an ally of the United States. We have military installations in Saudi Arabia, and they are actively campaigning against Islamic extremists in other parts of the world, most notably Yemen. And lo and behold, in spite of what other critics might say, Donald Trump is not exactly the dictator that people make him out to be. As it turns out, we do have a system of checks and balances. In fact, that was readily displayed in the way a federal judge based out of Washington put a halt on the executive order. Now, of course, Donald Trump is fighting this, but I think this just goes to show that there is a system of checks and balances still in place within our government today, and that this whole executive order has been widely overblown. But with all of that said, I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you like what I do, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, check out my Patreon, and I'll see you next time. Savage out.